interwebs here. There we are. It says we're live. Let's verify. I got so many live videos hanging out on the feed. There we are. I see us. It's real. We're really here. All right. Booyah. Here we go. Well, what's up? What's up, business nerds? And what's up, Frank Bourque? Good to have Frank. I think this is your second time on the show, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
Um,
great to be here again then.
but I don't know. The show has evolved a little bit. It used to just be like a live internet show that we did on Facebook, and then that was kind of the home of it. And now it's out on YouTube, and then it turns into a podcast. I'd have to check. I don't know. We've taken some of the older shows, like when I'm not able to do a show for a week, and we take an older show and turn it into a podcast. So I don't remember if we ever took the old episode that you and I did and made it a podcast or not. We'll see. Maybe they just go back to back. Maybe we just end up running them back to back.
I'm glad to see that. You mentioned you were going to do that, and to see that it's on YouTube and podcasts and all that stuff now, it's good. Then you're involved.
We just did our 100th episode, our 100th podcast episode. So I don't even know how many episodes of Bookkeeping Beer and BS we did before the podcast started, but we've done 100 podcast episodes now. So once you hit that mark, I feel like the sky's the limit. Here's the thing for all you guys watching. If you're on Facebook, especially, share the feed. It's way better if you guys share it than if I share it. I shared it to my page just so anybody that's friends with me sees it. But if you're out there and you're a pressure washer, throw it in a pressure washing group. If you're a landscaper, throw it in a landscaping group. Frank's got a green industry background, but everything that we're going to talk about is going to be relevant to all of the home service spaces. And so if somebody needs some good business content and probably with a finance angle to it, share it out there, get this in front of people, give it a like, give it a subscribe, whatever media, give it the 5 stars. I don't know. There's all the different ways to rank it. You guys know what to do. But give us some love. And by all means, the show is always better if you guys are throwing questions in. So drop your questions in for Frank and myself as we're getting, deep into the content here. Because it's fun to answer your stuff and let it roll. If you've never tuned into the late night happy hour show here on Bookkeeping Beer and BS, what we're shooting for is exactly the conversation that Frank and I would be having if we were just sitting at a bar at a convention next to each other. We've got some ideas of stuff that we want to talk about. Obviously, we want to hear from you guys and what you want to hear us talk about. So if you're on the live feed, drop some questions in and we'll address those. But we're trying to just replicate that conversation that two business owners have when they're sitting at a bar. And obviously, we're going to talk about our businesses and our experiences and the pitfalls and the successes and all that stuff. Frank, you ready to dive in, man?
I'm ready. Born ready.
So here now a little background on Frank and I. Frank was my Conquer coach for let's see, I was in a group coaching program, and then we did just some one-on-one coaching. Mm-hmm. Are you still coaching with Conquer, Frank, or are you not doing that anymore?
I am no longer doing coaching with Conquer, but it's a small world, so I'm sure I might end up on a Conquer stage at some point at an event. Still great friends of mine. The whole bunch of coaches there, everyone there is great. It's just my business has transitioned since we last.
Yep.
Conquer.
I asked it because I didn't want to assume it, but I thought that was the case. So I want to kind of get into some of your background and stuff. I know you from having some landscaping experience. You've had landscaping businesses. You have coaching experiences. You have public speaking experiences. Can you give us kind of the quick, short, and sweet background on Frank Bourque, how you got started, some of your business experiences, and the transitions that you've been in recently here?
Yeah, for sure. So just going way back, as a student, I was in the landscape industry just to pay my studies and did that for about 6 years and transitioned to saying, hey, I could do this on weekends, right? And then started this little weekend side thing. But at the same time, I had a full-time job with the federal government, so good money, pension, right? Kind of got attached to that. But then
so you had the old government kitty paying your bills, and then on the side you were hustling, huh?
Yeah, hustling on the side, but did that to the point where we grew a business to over 110 employees. 4 different locations, and then the economy kind of took a downfall in
What
2008.
year? I was gonna say, what year were you doing that in? Um, and there's something that maybe you skipped over in there is like you're doing it as a side hustle, but then all of a sudden it's 4 locations and 110 employees, and I feel like that probably doesn't just happen by accident. What was
Yeah,
the transition there to go from side hustle to this is like a main gig, and I'm going to leave the government job or the corporate job? Because I feel like that's for a lot of people, like they're on that fence, right? They're part time, they're full time firefighters, and then they start a business on the side, or they're cops and they start a business on the side, or they're in the corporate world like I was, and they start dabbling a little bit on the weekends.
yep.
What was it like? Where was the inflection point for you when you were like, "All right, I'm doing this." You know, this used to be like a hobby and a part time job to make some side hustle cash, and now I just realized this is like a career. Was there a moment or an inflection point that created that for you?
Yeah, for me, it was just I wanted it so bad to be my own boss. Like I just
Yeah.
wanted to be able to have. Um, I didn't want to be limited to a salary. I didn't want to be limited to a certain amount. I was like, hey, I'm gonna hustle until I meet some of my goals. So I want to double or triple this salary.
Hmm.
I want to able to, and then once you have a bunch of employees, it's more like, hey, I could help them build their lives as well, and help their family, and so I became more passionate about that. So I partnered up with a couple other people to be able to acquire businesses
Hmm.
that help us grow to that rate. So it's there's always like a backstory to the whole story, but that's essentially it was the wanting to get out of that being stuck in the job, going into the office every day because you have
Yep.
to saying, hey, if I build something great, maybe I'll have more than 3 4 weeks vacation a year. Maybe I'll have more than just that, but it's good for some people. They want the stability. I don't think I was born to have stability in that sense, in that same way.
Yeah.
So uh, that's where the entrepreneurial side comes out, and that's what feeds me, and that's what kind of inspired me to want to do the same for other people. And then as it grew, I learned a lot. Obviously, Dan, you know it too. I had to learn from so many mistakes, and then something like the economy that's not always predictable. You don't know how hard it's going to hit you. Well, it
I mean,
hit us.
I feel like we're living that right now. Like, what?
Yeah,
How bad is this recession going to be? It's coming. It's,
yeah,
it's here. But is it going to be like a low floor, or is it just like is the floor going to drop out and we're all going to be scrambling looking for a way out? Who
yeah,
knows?
yeah. And we're all trying to get answers. Talk to economists. Listen to people who have kind of been there before. Their predictions have been kind of accurate. So I'm doing the same right now, and I think nobody knows for sure. But one thing's for sure is we're all going to have to adapt somehow, either on
Mhm.
the personal side, on the business side, and you know we've sat down and talked about all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that we can't, if there's one big lesson that I've learned, is that you can't just sit back and hope for the best. Like that's never the plan for business owners.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and then the
We're and
second
we're
part,
usually pretty good. We're usually pretty good about not waiting around. I'd say usually our flaw is more the other way that we like force the issue a little too much for a lot of us.
yeah, exactly. So we did that for many years, and finally transitioned as things got a little bit easier because we had more systems in place. I think naturally people ask you to go speak about it, or to show what you're
Mhm.
doing, which I did. That brings us to about 2013, 2015, where I was starting to speak more and more throughout Canada and the US. And then it really became like a full time job just speaking.
Mhm.
So being at over 80 to 100 events a year, it just kept me so busy. So I transitioned out by selling the first business in 2015, and then the second business in 2017, and then just been full time coach, consultant, and speaker since then. So
What
that's
what was the what was that inflection point? Was it just like uh a monopolization of your time that caused you to be like, all right, like I can't speak all the time and run all these businesses. I got
Hmm.
to like kind of pick one or the other.
Yeah.
And how did you make that decision and say this is like the path for me right now?
You know what? Then it's every time somebody asks me the question, I wonder if I should give the long story because there's a huge lesson behind it, or the short story that just kind of tells you that I had to transition out. But I'll tell you something that I think.
Give us enough of the long story that we're
Yeah,
really interested, and then
it's worth an
I
extra
might
two
ask
minutes.
more follow up questions to make it long.
It's an extra 2 minutes that is so worth it because it's one of the biggest lessons of my life. Okay, so I was during the time where I was building these businesses, I was really motivated, and I did not. Um, it's almost like I took it for granted what I had. You know, I had a
Hmm.
great wife. I had beautiful young kids. Like we're talking young, like we had her first in 2008, and then so they were young. They were like we're talking like 3 4 years old, maybe six, and then
I
or
said, this is me right now. You're talking. You are
yeah,
me right now. I've
yeah,
like
you right
been
now,
married
right?
for 10 years. Got a 6 year old. Got a 4 year old. Got a 3 month old.
Yeah. So for all of you who have a similar situation, you're busy, your work takes most of your time, okay, and maybe you're still very motivated, but deep down you know that you cannot neglect or you should be spending more time. Well, listen to that little voice because one day, literally, one of the toughest days, not just because of what happened, but one day I was on just getting back from a job site, and one of my foremans, one of my crew leaders, had forgot to when installing one of our big retaining walls, forgot to put what we call geogrid. Anyways, it's very important when it's just structural walls. So
Hmm.
you know basically we had to redo the wall. But so coming back, I knew it was the end of the season. I didn't have time to redo that job and then to complete more jobs. It's going to be one or the other. So I was going to lose at least $25,000 out of it. I show up at home and my wife at the time is ready to leave. Like she's literally packed up and ready to go. Right.
Hmm.
Uh, and that hit me like a ton of break because she was like the type of person who's got so much patience, but as soon as it ran out, it's like I was missing all the cues,
Yep.
right? And in
Yep.
my mind,
Well, and like you said earlier, we just get absorbed because we're so obsessive
yeah,
about the thing we're building that it consumes us, and
yeah,
we're so passionate about it.
I thought my job would be to provide for my family, and I think I used it even like an excuse.
Hmm.
But at the same time, her being at home, I really tried to make the business still grow while I didn't want it to kind of stall or lose the momentum that we had.
Yep.
But at the same time, I don't think I was working on the right systems to make the business independent from me. So that's kind of what I want to talk about today a little bit more in different ways because it's all related to numbers, right?
Yep. Yep.
You show about that. It's like the back office operations. You have that in your business, and you have the back office operations in your personal life.
Hmm.
Like the work life balance is it's all about that, and I think we have to recognize the cues, but at the same time, you have to do two things. You have to do it in your business and you have to do it in your personal life. So everything that I'm going to say tonight applies to to the biggest lessons in my life because the back office operations at home is making sure that you take care of your priorities at home. And so what are your KPIs at home? What are you tracking? What measures your success at home? And, for you, Dan, what makes your wife smile or your kids smile? And it's probably spending time with them,
I would say
correct?
it's like how many times I touch the laundry, how many diapers I change, numbers of dates we go on. I think uh, and actually, like you're speaking to me right now because last week I was gone on a hunting trip. Now I come back and I have 4 shows this week. Like I had a couple. Like this is my Wednesday night normal show, but like an impromptu one yesterday. I have an impromptu one tonight or tomorrow night. Um, and so it's like I'm just consumed by work all week because I was out for a week, which is like 2 weeks of family neglect in a way, right? And
Mm,
so you're hitting home to me because this is like a conversation my wife and I are having right now is like, how do I stay in balance like she wants to support me growing this awesome business, and she's all about it, but like in a way that brings us all along, right? Not in a way that leaves her behind because I'm always gone doing Dan stuff. And so you're hitting it home for me, trying
Yeah.
to, and I'm right now I'm very much like leaned towards Dan stuff instead of Marty, my wife. Like
Hmm.
she needs just more of me checking boxes, doing things.
Checking. Yeah.
So I'm feeling you.
And for a guy like you who's going through it right now, um, if I would go back a few years back when it happened to me, if I could do better now, is spending, even if it's just 5 minutes, asking yourself those two questions. What could I be doing at home that brings more value? And what could I bring to my business that would bring more value? Because when you're asking those two questions, you can't forget one, because you forget one, there's always something else that comes back and kind of bites you in the back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've ever heard the expression, you can't have, like in business, in what we do in contracting or whatever it is, like that whoever is listening to this show tonight, I don't know if you've ever heard or probably seen it on the internet, but you can only have two out of three things, right? Like if you're going to do a job and a client says, hey, I want it to be top quality, I want it to be cheap, and I want it to be fast, right? Like timely. Well, you can only give two of three ever. So it can be good quality and cheap, but it's not going to get done fast, right? It's going to get done on the spare time.
Yep.
It can be cheap and fast, but you're not going to
Quality's
have the
important.
quality. And the opposite is true for, it can be fast and good quality, both, which everyone wants to be fast and good quality, but it's not going to be cheap, right?
Yep. Yep.
So, but the same is true for the business, right? If you want a business to run really well, like a well-oiled machine, the engine of your business is the back office operations, and that's what we neglect. Like we're not making money in the office. We got to go in the field and make the money, right?
Yep. Yep.
But essentially, what I've seen in every single case scenario of everyone I've ever worked with, consulted, coached, is I noticed that the best ones, they take care of the back office operations. So the best ones do this, but the best of the best take care of the back office operations in the business and at home.
Yeah.
So
That's a good.
this
That's a
is
good way to
where
look at it.
I think I was working hard on one, back in the day where I wanted to really, be top level, grow the business, but I was forgetting that side in my personal life.
Yep. Yep. I one thing that I keep finding through our bookkeeping clients is very similar, which is so many people want to get off the truck, right? Like that's the goal for every business owner, and it tends to be that they get off the truck and then they go do the office job. Except that, and I think that admin role, that back office stuff, takes a lot of focus, but they're not the best at it at
Yeah.
all. They're terrible at answering the phone. They're terrible at following up. They're too ADD to build the processes because they're entrepreneurs. They're not always good executors. They're visionaries. They're not integrators, and so they hire people to go do the stuff in the field, which act like financially, that job is the one that pays the most money.
Yeah.
The like financially, it's the person in the field. If you were out of the business altogether and you were just hiring the roles, the person out in the field makes more money than the office manager usually does. Like they're out in the trenches, right? Uh, and then the business owner fires themselves from the thing that generates the most money and puts themselves in the thing that they're usually the worst at, but actually like needs the most coordination, which is less costly, but equally, if not more important, to like keep the business on track. And
Mm-hmm.
so the business owner like puts themselves in a role they're not good at because they feel like there's somebody somewhere told them that they need to be off the truck, and that's actually the thing they're good at probably because that's where
Mm-hmm.
they started, and that's the thing that makes the most amount of money. And so I see a lot of people like prematurely get off the truck and really like spin their wheels. And I think their intent is correct, which is I know this is really important to run this business and get these back office processes dialed in, but I think where they fail is that they're not good at that thing. And a lot of them don't love it. They just feel like there's pressure, there's peer pressure really to like get off the truck and get into the
Yeah,
office.
yeah,
So I see that over and over and over again.
yeah. And often, what they don't realize is that those back office systems can easily be put in place with a little bit of brainstorming. So it doesn't have to be all the owner that has to do it. Sometimes there's an admin position. It could be part time. It could be full time eventually. But these are some of the easiest positions to fill when it's done right. And um, but I think overall, when we're talking business, and if you and I were to say, hey, where are we going to be in 10 years? It's hard to predict where we're going to be in 2 years, but
Yeah, I was gonna
you
say
know,
10 years is like light years away, even though it'll be here tomorrow.
but if there's one thing that you would probably like to have more guarantee about would be, hey, if there's a way to make sure that my life is has gained value, you know, if we would have to point out some things that we could do well, one of the things, in the business would be, well, obviously we all know, we all talk about financial performance. We want to make sure that the financial performance is there, that it's predictable, it's consistent a little bit more than it was at the beginning,
Yep.
um, that your revenue keeps growing, that your profit keeps growing. So that's one of the ways to measure that in 10 years. But there's so much more. And I think then over the years, that's what I've realized when I was doing a lot of coaching and consulting is we help people, we want to bring them to the next step. And sometimes people are really focused short term. They're just like, hey, help me survive this year. I just want to survive this year. And there's not enough planning long term. And people say, well, I don't know where I'm going to be next year. No, sure. But one thing for sure is probably that you want to make sure you're in a better position than you are right now, right? And most people say yes. And that's the same for the company and in your personal life. So there's there's certain things that any business owner can do, and if you keep focus on these things, that can increase your the business value. And ultimately, as an entrepreneur, you want to be able to offer more value to other people, and you want that value to come back to you. And usually when you give more, and sometimes it takes less effort when you have better systems, it comes back to you in great ways, like either more revenue, more profit, when you either simplify your business or systemize your business. So there's all kinds of stuff we can talk about tonight, but really I feel like inspired to talk about these things that increase the value, because then if ever you decide to transition, you decide to exit, you decide to sell, you decide to acquire more, even, at least the bank will look at you with a smile and say, hey, yeah, for sure, your business is worth this much. It grew in worth, you know.
Mhm.
And I don't think everyone is aware of this, but it's simpler to do, but it takes planning, right?
Yeah, it's funny you brought that up because I hadn't everything you said like rings true, and I just had never I've recognized it but never like called it out about
Mm,
the short term length of planning. I'm like
mhm.
the corporate world would just overdo it. Everything was like an MPV or an IRR on a 10 or 20 year thing, and I'm just like, man, I don't even know if I'm gonna be here in 10 or 20 years. We got Bobby Walker in the house. What's up, Bobster? Good to see you. I think Bobby might be on my show next week, even next week or the week
Nice.
after. Good to
Nice.
see you, Bob. The I've had a few clients recently, like when I'm doing my CFO kind of thing for our bookkeeping clients. A few of them are like, "Hey, let's build a budget, but let's build a 3 year budget." And I'm like, "Yeah, let's like, why would we stop at 3 years? Let's go to 5 years." But I'm starting to see more and more of that where it's just like, "Hey, this is a business and not a hobby or not
Mm.
just a job." Um, Apparently Bob didn't know we were on for next week. It might be 2 weeks out, Bob. I don't know. We'll see. It's on a Wednesday night within the next few weeks. Uh, but I see that over and over again, and I haven't called it out, and I think you just called it out. Like
Mm.
if we're really like running these businesses, where the hell are we going? Because most of the time it's just, here's the revenue number I want to hit at the end of this year, and then once I'm done with that, I'll see where I land, and maybe then I'll think about the revenue number I want to hit the year after that. It's
Yep.
like a lot of the shit to hit that next year revenue number needs to start happening right now,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
right now, or it's gonna be too late.
Like today I was having this conversation with a couple who own a business together, and they want to obviously grow like everyone wants to do. And then one strange thing happens, because when I asked them, so what do you want on a personal level? Like, they knew what they wanted business level, the revenue, the profit margins, the type of employees they want, the type of business they want to grow. But then we get to the personal life, they're like, well, I mean, if we have time. And I'm like, no, that's going to be our priority. We're, the building the business has to be around your personal needs, and then it becomes the ideal business. Because if one thing I've learned is, you can build the worst business for you, not knowing what you want on a personal level. So, like, asking myself all these questions: what do I want? Like, when would I like to retire? What would I like that to look like? What kind of house do I want to own? What kind of lifestyle do I want to provide to me, my family, or I
Mhm.
just want to have? And so, having that in mind, and a lot of people say, well, it's not realistic for me to start thinking about it because I have to start making profit in my business first. That's not how it works,
I was gonna say, like, if you have the right goal, like that's the thing that like
drives you.
required the profit.
Yeah. I I use that as the biggest motivator with my clients, because that's their why. That's why they're doing all this hard work.
Mm-hmm.
It's to have that ideal lifestyle. So if the client doesn't know the exact lifestyle they want, I have to make them dream about it as much as I can, until they go like, yeah, this is worth it. Like, I want this and I want this. And so we have to dig deep sometimes to get the motivated part, because I know by experience, if I don't get them to have that motivation to want to keep doing the hard work when it gets even tougher,
Mm-hmm.
there's no way we're going to go anywhere together. Like, we
Yeah.
have to find that deep down. So, there's key drivers that will bring your company value up. And I think it's worth talking about it today, because um, yes, it comes back to numbers. But second thing, it's easy things that you can start thinking about, is saying, hey, this year, what do I want to do out of these key drivers? I heard from Dan's show the other day, like, I'm not doing 5 out of these 8. Like, what else could I be doing to work towards that?
Mm-hmm.
And life usually gets easier the more of these drivers you're putting into your business, right?
There's one thing you said in there, Frank, that made me just like revisit a common saying. Now this common saying like almost bugs me a little bit as an entrepreneur. I heard it all the time in the corporate world, but the saying is work-life balance. And I was
Yep.
like, man, it's like work and life. Sure, in the corporate world, it's a balance. In an entrepreneurial world, it's not a balance, it's a weave. They're both
Mhm.
happening at the same time. It's not a teeter totter. Like, you're always doing both at the same time, and your family is along on the ride. Like, it's not that they're taking a step off and then you're revisiting your family and then you're revisiting your business. Like, all of you are going down this path together. And like, if you start trying to weave that together, but one ends up over here, like, it ain't part of the cloth anymore. And so it's not really a balance. But the other thing that when you were just talking, it almost flips that around. Like, it's not the work that starts first, it's the rest of your life that's actually like the main thread of that thing. And so you need to be weaving your work around the main thread of your life
Mhm.
instead of trying to weave your life around the main thread of your work,
Yeah.
which I think I'm on the cusp of being guilty of. Like, I'm super passionate about what we do and like doing all the things that I do, but I'm on the edge of like weaving the thing around the wrong thing. And so, and if you like the term work life balance, I would just challenge you to think it's a life work balance. Like, the
Yeah.
life is what comes
Yeah.
first. The work is just the thing to support the lifestyle. I think
I
you made
love
that
that.
pretty clear.
Yeah, really well, really, really well said. And essentially, that's what it is. Sometimes it would have been a good fit for someone in their 20s, because the lifestyle in your 20s is so different, right?
Totally.
And then in your 30s, it kind of starts to change for some people. In your 40s, you're starting to think like, hey, maybe I want things to get easier, and I want to have more time off.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into your 50s, you're like, hey, I got to think about for sure retirement, or at least making sure that my business is bringing enough income to support my lifestyle without having to work all the time. And for some people, that starts really early. So it doesn't matter when it kind of, you know, this feeling hits you where you want to have more time for yourself, better lifestyle, but you hit it bang on when you said, it's about thinking what you want and building the business around that, and not the opposite way around, because it's just supposed to support the lifestyle that you want. Although it can have a big part into what your lifestyle is. Maybe your business is part of your day to day. You're engaging with people all the time, and it doesn't even feel like business. That's great, but essentially you have to make sure it meets what you really want, and what people around you need that you want to
Yeah.
keep around.
Yep. Yep. I think the challenge that I run into, and so many small business owners are on the spectrum of like love hate with their business, and it
Mhm.
can change day to day, right? The biggest challenge I have is, especially with our bookkeeping business, I'm just in freaking love with this business, and like that's risky
Yeah.
because it's really easy for me to prioritize anything for the business and the excuse of, I mean, and you were talking about like I got this trade-off of I either got to go do this job or I got to go do that thing. But even when you said it now, right, it was not I have a trade-off between I can go save this job or I can go do that job or I can go like support my marriage and my family, which is like the third choice that we always have. And as we get super obsessive about our businesses and like really fall in love with our businesses, we're at the danger of putting the work first instead of putting the life first.
Yeah.
And like I'm as guilty as charged. My wife would be like, "Yep, yeah, I can give you 5 examples of when you did that in the last month, right?"
Yeah.
Um, and so I just think that's something we need to be super careful about. Is like we get so carried away and we get so determined with these businesses that we have
Yeah.
that it can lead to some things that we don't want just because we get so obsessed with it.
Yeah. And um, further to that, like, when it comes back to, you were asking me, so what are you doing now? What have you done? What I'm doing now is basically this. Like, as a consultant, I assess where you're at with what you want and need, let's say for a lifestyle, and what you want and need for your life. And then we create a roadmap to build that ideal business around that. And, but it legit took me a few years to figure out, like, hey, why is it working with some people and not with some other people? Like, they still have a great roadmap, but why is one more motivated than the other? And for me, that was the big aha moment. It's because for some people, it's created around the lifestyle and their personal needs and what they want, and not just kind of a dream that they haven't updated over the years. There's just something they want to reach for a goal, right? Because
Yep.
that's why a lot of people are not happy once they reach the goal.
It's
Because,
just just a round number that they threw out there because somebody told them that a million wasn't an important thing.
yep. Then they reach it, they're like, hey, I'm still as miserable in my marriage. I'm just as miserable, as a person. I thought that would make me happy. And they keep putting these goals out. But really, it's asking you the questions like, hey, look at the lifestyle you would like to have, and what kind of people would you have around, and then what does it take to keep that around and to build on it. And that's, I can really say that that's the most important um, factor that you have to consider before starting to do all these things as an entrepreneur. So yes, I started in the green industry, but now I'm just passionate about, I help people in pretty much all the home services industry, and then entrepreneurs just in general. Because when you're ready to do the deep dive, that's when you give someone like me a call. It's because you're just tired of running around trying to, if you're not trained in doing the assessment of these things, it's not easy to do, and it's even harder when it's for yourself.
Mhm.
So it's hard for me to do for myself. That's why I have my own coach and my own mentors. But essentially, the person on the other side asks you some really important question that makes you think, like, hey, I need to update my plan. Like, there's a lot of stuff that changed in the last year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. And for some people, they just don't update that plan. So
Yeah.
I think, it's a combination of the passion that you have, but also paying attention to the cues that life gives you. Right?
So as you've gotten more into like coaching and speaking, how has your perspective changed from when you were running the operations of your own business, when you get that like insight into other people's businesses? How many like aha moments where you're just like, oh shit, that's what's going on? Like, man, I wish I would have like seen that from a bird's eye view of my own businesses back in the day. How do you think that's changed your perspective?
So, man, that's a great question. Essentially, when you're faced with looking at all the different things you've missed because now you see them being on the outside. One of the other important lessons I've had was looking at my business is I had to learn to be a better coach to my team because all your team members needs a good coach, someone who can guide them and point them and ask them the right questions that makes them think, not someone that does everything for them. They won't learn anything if you're just doing the job for them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the best leaders, they ask the best questions. And then they also give the best pep talk. Like, and usually when they're giving the pep talk, it's more about the other person. It's not about what the owner needs. It's about like, hey, if we complete this on time, let's make it your goal to save this much money or to finish this time in the afternoon so you can be home for the family, or like the goals are more for that person than
Yeah.
for business. The best leaders I know in the industry and business owners are the ones that make it all about the employee.
Mm-hmm.
They, of course, they have goals for the business. They keep track of that, but they motivate their team by talking about what's in it for them, right? When
It's
people know you care, they start caring, right?
it's super funny that you bring that up. One of my last leaders when I was in the corporate world was the worst at, I mean, like he had a good financial plan, but it was super selfishly motivated, and
Mm,
he couldn't even disguise it. Like when he was speaking and giving that like motivational talk, you could tell it was just all bullshit because it would usually end with like, here's what I need you to do, and it was all like, here's what I need you to do for me to hit my bonus. I mean, like, and he would damn near say that verbatim, and it was just like, sweet, let's go get you your big ass bonus, which is more than I make in a salary in a year. Let me just run through a brick wall for you, man. Would love to do that. Like it just kind of cracked me up. The last couple, that was like the president of our business, um, and my manager was like kind of managed scared, like reported to him, but managed me scared, and so like was just a relayer of that information. And I'm such a contrarian that I was just like, I couldn't handle it because I was just like, man, I just want to do the opposite of whatever you guys are telling me because I hate how you're leading me. Like I went from having like a really good leader that was just like, Dan, I trust you, I believe in you, let me know what you think we need to do, to like, here's exactly what you need to do and you need to do it so I get a big bonus. And I was just like, man, I can't wait to leave the corporate world and join Blue Skies because there's
yeah,
just nothing worse than like the person that's leading you being like, this is all for me. Here's what I need from you. You'd be
yeah.
like, okay, well, that sucks.
And that can be done in so many simple ways. Like, you don't have to give them a stake in the business or shares in the business, but you can give them a stake in the outcome, um, just by, like, if you've ever read the book The Great Game of Business, right? Like, by Jack Stack. It's he If you're transparent about what you do and you start talking to them as in, what's in it for them. It doesn't always have to be on a financial level, but it does help if they understand, that it's not all net profit.
Mm-hmm.
But also, if you give them a walk in your shoes, like, you ask better questions, like if you say something like, hey, if you own the company, what would you do? And you're legit interested in hearing what they have to say, people will start looking at the owner in a different way. They're like, I think he really wanted an answer from me, like, as in, he was interested in what I had to do, right? So there's many ways you can make the employees feel that the success is really about everyone and not just the business. So to me, that was a big lesson for me. I really learned that um, business is more about building relationships. And if you have employees, well, it starts there. And then if you have clients, great, because you'll need some to run the business. And then you'll have to do the same with them. And the more you nurture those relationships, the companies that I see, some companies, they offer the service once and they don't even bother reaching out again to those clients. So they
Yeah.
miss out on reoccurring business because, well, for their own reason, maybe they just don't have a system in place that reaches out again. But it's easier to get a past customer than a new customer.
It's
So
way cheaper from a
way
finance
cheaper.
guy's perspective. It's way more cost effective to serve an existing client.
So why are we not all doing it? And but looking back, I wasn't the best at doing it either. But now looking in, I'm like, it's all about nurturing relationships. It's all
Mhm.
about making it more about them than you as the owner. And the people I know who do that the best are the ones that are succeeding the most and growing the most. Don't you find?
Always, always.
Yeah.
I go so far in our like window cleaning and pressure washing businesses. We know our average job size, and so we'll set our marketing budget specifically based on the strategy of not making any money on new clients. Like
Mm,
we know what our average job size and therefore and we know our financial structure, and so we'll spend not only our marketing budget, but we'll also spend all of our profit that we have budgeted on marketing for that next client so that we make $0 when we serve a new client because we're absolutely banking on them having a great experience and referring us. And we're going to follow up with them over and over and over and over and over again. And we're going to clean their gutters, and then we're going to pressure
yeah.
wash their house, and then we're going to hang holiday lights for them. And so the value's in the relationship. It's not in the transaction.
Wow.
It's all in the referral and the repeat. So we literally build our business around the expectation that they refer and we get to repeat. So
Yeah.
we don't need to make any money off of them when we do work for them. We make $0, and that seems to pay dividends over and over and over again.
For I hope that for at least one person, it's an aha moment for them because for some of my clients, that's legit what took them from struggling to saying, hey, we have absolutely no process in place to keep clients, to nurture those relationships, and even do the same for employees. Like, some people quit and they don't even ask why they quit. But if they
Mm-hmm.
ask that question, it might be what would fix the relationship with two other employees in the business.
Yep.
Um, and it's way easier to keep your own employees, again, just like it is to keep a client, than to find new ones, especially if they're already good. So it's and I bet then for the time that you didn't know, you had not learned that lesson yet, if you can remember those times, it was probably a constant grind and having to spend so much more money and effort to acquire the same results. So for those who just learn that lesson really quick and actually start applying it and implementing it is the hardest part because
Yep.
it takes the effort and you get out of your comfort zone. But once you do and you realize, wow, like I exert less energy, I have more results, I can do that in other parts of my business. And then that's why some people do 1 million a year or 10 million a year, and they work less than those who were just starting out and at 500,000 a year.
Yep.
So I have those conversations constantly, but those are just a few examples of a mindset, a change in mindset, a paradigm shift, a way of thinking that can legit change the course of your business.
Yep. I had a realization. I mean, this is like an ongoing realization, but we've gotten a handful of businesses that are plus 1 million in revenue, and bookkeeping is our most recent one. So we started that 3 4 years ago. I guess 3 years ago, kind of ground up, and it's all been like through this show and through networking and going to conventions and through like this year now we're on $1 million plus pace, and so it's like it took a whole shitload of hard work, right? I mean,
Yep.
businesses don't just start growing by accident. You invest a whole lot of time and a whole lot of effort in building the processes. But there's an interesting thing that happens as you kind of crest that point. Now, like $1 million business sounds great, but it's actually like the hardest business to run because you have all the problems
Oh yeah.
without all of the scale and the finances to solve them all. But
Hmm.
as you start to get over that point with some momentum, it just starts to become really clear that it's a people business. It
Yep.
doesn't matter if you're bookkeeping, it's a people business and a decision making business. It doesn't
Mm.
matter if you're bookkeeping, if you're landscaping, if you're hardscaping, if you're window cleaning, if you're maid service. As a CEO, you're in the business of making decisions and treating people really well.
Yep.
And like literally, if you do that, the people on your team are going to figure out how to take care of the customer in the processes. You just need to take care of them. It's their
Mm.
job to take care of the customer, right? It's their job to build the processes. You just need to say, hey, it looks like this process is maybe a little bit off because I'm looking at the financials and I can see this area of our business is getting sideways. And it's been really cool to watch that with our bookkeeping business because it's just like I've seen it enough times in our other businesses, but we've acquired most of them, and so we like acquire the problems. Our bookkeeping business, we built all of our own problems. I can't blame anybody else for the problems. They're all my problems. There's no finger to point besides the one at me. But it's so cool to see our team like develop and our general manager just crush it and bring just value that I could never bring.
Hmm.
It's just there's no way I could do it by myself. And all of a sudden you just start realizing like, man, it's just my job to take really good care of them and to help like guide the decisions that we make. I had a
Why?
I even one little digression here. I even had a conversation today with my admin. My admin and my general manager hired a person without me knowing at all. Like they hired some administrative help. And I like my initial reaction was like, how dare you guys hire somebody without me knowing? Like I get hiring a technician, right? Like
Yep.
capacity and demand. If we need more, like our bookkeepers are, we measure their production rates. And if we need more bookkeepers, let's hire another bookkeeper. But to hire an administrative person is a whole nother realm that it's like, I'm not comfortable with these decisions being made without me. And I was like, man, I'm just being a little bitch about this. Like thanks for taking control of a situation and seeing a problem.
Yeah.
And literally, I had to say to my admin today, I was like, I'm uncomfortable with the fact that you guys made this decision, but I'm like, I just need you to be patient with me. It's a me
That's
problem
good.
that it's just like I'm not used to my employees hiring administrative people. It's never happened before. In any of my businesses, no employee has hired an administrative person without me at least saying, yep, let's fill that role. It was like they
Yep.
developed the role and hired a person for it. And I'm like, we did what? Like, when did we do that? Why did we do that? And they're like, because we got to do all these things. And I was like, yeah, we do. But
Yep.
you should have told, like, it's just like weird. Like, I was just like uncomfortably like aware of that. Okay, you guys are like running this thing without me and I need to get out of the way, but just give me some time. I'm going to be moving slow out of the way.
Some of my best moments in realizing that some of the people I know or business owners that I know were the way I could tell they were reaching another level was when their teams could start making important decisions and it was the right ones and they knew the step-by-step process to do to make those decisions, what they needed to do. And my friend Sam, he's probably one of the best people person because you talked about two things. You talked about nurturing the relationships, but then it's also about being able to check in with yourself and your own ego. Because sometimes we stay in something too long
Oh, God, yeah.
because we're like, hey, like this is supposed to be with me. And sometimes it's like, no, the business outgrew you. You know what I mean? Like the business is to a point where you have so many competent people around you, they can start making important decisions and it's the right ones. And once you start paying attention to people saying, hey, here's a red flag, we need this. And you're like, how do you know we need this? I didn't even pick up on it. It means they're competent and their level of competency is increasing. My friend Sam was just going to say, he's one of the best people person I know. And I challenge everyone here to try to think about the business owner, someone you know who owns a business and who's a really good people person. It doesn't have to be good with numbers necessarily, but usually good people person are really good to build relationships. They're good at finding people for their business. They're good at putting the right people in the right positions because they ask the right questions usually. But my friend Sam, the great thing about what he was doing is he was building this team. He's probably around the $8 million range right now. But when I started just to talk to him and stuff, he had just probably hit 5 million in the first 5 years, and then he just focused on being more profitable before he grew more.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, he was putting the right people in the right places. He was finding the right people. And essentially what happened one day, about 3.5 years later, from the time where I got to know him to the time where this happened, he called me one day. He's like, Frank, it's a pretty sad day. I just went into work and everything was done. Like the meeting had been held without me, and everyone knows what they have to do. So the whole leadership team was taking over because he had gradually delegated some stuff, and people were holding meeting, without him, but still briefing him, but just small brief. Hey, this is the KPIs for this week, and here's what we need, and that's it. Like we discussed the rest, right?
Yeah,
And he
we're good.
said,
FYI.
FYI, right? But now his measure of success is the business is more profitable than ever. He's working less in his business than ever. I would say probably close to 90% less than he did, maybe 10 years back.
Mm-hmm.
And so that gave him a whole lot of more time to focus on his new projects. And he still owns a profitable business,
Mm-hmm.
great revenue. He still helps them solve the big issues, but he's not involved in the same way. And I think this is a measure of how you nurture relationships, how you encourage people to make decisions, how you show them how to make the good decisions. And, it's all part of the process. But the biggest thing I think you said is you have to sometimes look at, do I have to take out my ego out of this equation? Because is it a me problem or is it a situational problem where I still have to deal with it? Because it always comes back to the owner. If you're missing a system, you have to figure it out or find a person that can.
Yep.
But essentially, if there's any problem in the business, it always comes back to saying or asking you the question, what can you do to increase the value of the business or the value of whatever you're trying to do by bringing in the right person or encouraging people to make those decisions for you, and showing them how to. But no, you said it well, and you have to check in with yourself once in a while to ask yourself those questions for sure.
And it's scary as you grow because like you don't it's like your kids. You get back from a trip and you're like, I don't even recognize you anymore. Like you changed. And I
Yeah,
feel like the same thing about our business. Like you doubled this year. I don't even recognize you anymore, business. Like you're making decisions without me. What are we
yeah,
doing here?
yeah. And to me, it's one of the best measures when that starts to happen. It's like, okay, good. You've built momentum. That's the hardest thing to build is the momentum, right? It's like a rocket. When you launch a rocket, most of the energy that it takes to launch a rocket is in that first, like,
Mhm.
that first part where it's burning all that fuel to get there. But once it's up in the space, it's coasting now. It doesn't need
Mhm.
more, all that fuel. So it's like that barrier. Once you cross that barrier, you better take care of it because that's one of the best places to be when you've got that momentum and
Oh
people are
yeah.
starting to make their good decisions and people are motivated by that. They're more, independent, and then they're less dependent on you, and then they feel more competent, and then they feel more motivated. um, that's all part of building that momentum in a business and getting
Yep.
people to feel that way just as much as the owner needs to feel that way. Employees need to feel that way, and yeah, that attracts even better clients when clients see that also because you get more efficient, right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, it kind of runs full circle. It like feeds off of itself. So I mean,
Mhm.
the same thing can happen in like a downward spiral, right? If like the culture goes bad or there's too much drama or whatever, that can feed off of itself too. So I think you're right. It's a momentum thing. You got to keep that momentum going upward. Um, I know you got like value building topics that you want to get into here. Let's start hitting on some of those as you start, and it all points back to you as the owner, just like you were talking about Sam, um, working your way like outside of your business. So you're a CEO, you're a support, you're an owner instead of an operator. Because we always get stuck in this mindset of like we're an owner operator. And it's like, well, you can't be two people at once, but that's kind of what you're saying you are. So, where do we start with building that value to work our way to where the business can run without us, having to make all the decisions and oversee everything?
Yeah, I think you have to think. Obviously, there's financial, right? You want to make sure that financially you're going in the right direction, and you
Tell me
have to.
all about it. Tell me all about it. That's my favorite part.
Yeah, tell me all about it because you. That's the first thing, and usually that's the believe it or not, I would say probably over 80% of businesses are not doing it enough, and it's hurting them.
Mhm.
So, okay, we know about financials. The next thing is you got to make sure that the growth potential is there. So, for example, I was talking to a client the other day, and his services are all custom stuff, which is
Yeah,
the
not
hardest thing
super
to do.
scalable.
It's not scalable because it's hard to train your employees. His employees don't have the skill level or the maturity to attempt some of these. So it's owner dependent all the way. He has to be on site. So the growth potential is very limited. He's always struggling every year, but he's an artist, so he creates great things. Okay.
Mhm.
So you got to ask yourself, do we need to simplify things a little bit to have more growth potential? That will help free up some of your time, but it'll also help um, you build something that's sustainable. Okay. I'm not saying you can't go back to custom stuff once you're really good and you have a mature team. You just can't do it at that time. It's
Yep.
just not good timing. So look at the timing.
Is there a level I have an opinion on this because I've like seen it in our businesses when we've like tried to do custom stuff too early or chase shiny objects. Is there a level you see in the home service space where it's like if you're doing this much in revenue or this many employees or this much profit, now's the time to like chase some of those side projects?
Yeah.
So you don't. Is there any level that you see that points like
I
now's an okay time?
usually it's over $1 million because but it's also the maturity of the business. Because I
Mm-hmm.
know some businesses they're just over $1 million between 1 to 1.5, but they're very profitable. They're mature, so they've built some equity in the business. They have some savings. So that's the other part is if that gives you more power, more leverage. So if you're a young company, it's good to grow, but then you have to think about cash flow because you can hurt your business if there's a like for instance the economy if that switches. Right now, it's it's fair, half decent,
Yeah,
but
it's
what
still
if
it's
something's
hanging in there enough.
yeah, like, do you have enough money to survive 3 months as a business? Right? As in, if you had to pay everyone and had zero work coming in, could you survive? And then what would happen? Right?
Mhm.
So I remember when COVID hit, it's like everyone was asking themselves, like, "Hey, am I still in business in a few months from now? Like, we
Yeah,
can't go out, so what's happening, right?" Then
yeah,
they came up with all these government programs, so it turned out okay, have decent for especially the home service industry. There's other industry that suffered quite a bit, but so we really just never know, and I think we've all realized that during COVID because there's a lot of stuff that we could do, and then all of a sudden we can't do. So if you can't adapt as quick as the changes take place, it's going to be a challenge. So just making sure that you focus on having a good solid foundation is important. Part of having a foundation is looking at your cash flow, making sure that the work's up in the funnel, like how much work you have booked up, um, and how much are you growing, how fast are you growing. The other thing is how much reoccurring revenue do you have. We talked about like going back and talking to clients, past clients, to offer other services or maybe maintenance
I was
services
gonna
or
say though, like just like layering in those recurring services, especially the farther north you are. The farther
oh,
north you are, the more important it gets because you can't just keep selling the one off jobs all year. You run into some incremental weather that makes one off jobs not work so good. So
mhm.
maintenance packages come in real handy, especially if you can just like bill it monthly.
Yeah, and I always say, I have a lot of people, especially in their 50s, that are my clients who ask, like, "Hey, I'd like to eventually sell my business." Well, this is exactly if you don't have any reoccurring revenue stuff coming in, people start asking you, like, "Okay, so I have to find all my new clients if I buy this business?"
Yeah,
Like,
what am I buying? I'm buying your phone number.
yeah, you're buying a phone number or I'm buying a list of people you haven't contacted for 3 4 years, right? So
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
this is part of it. then you have to think about like what piece of the pie do you have in your market? Like how are you known in your market? What kind of monopoly do you have? Um, and maybe it's fine. Maybe there's enough business and there's a lots of you out there. But how do you differentiate yourself from other people? What makes you special? What makes you stand out? If you don't know that answer, you can focus on being the most efficient or the one who's like offering some of the top quality out there, or some of the you're just known for a good brand that's well marketed.
Mhm.
So these are just some examples of what you can do for this. And then you got to make sure that your business is, if you want to gain value, you got to make sure that year after year you show a profit. So you got to keep track of what sucks out the money out of your business. What are the waste in your business? And
Mhm.
every month, but I mean every year especially, you should do a review that looks at, hey, where is some of that money that we could go recapture, so that next year we can be that 1% better than we were this year,
Yep.
efficiency wise. It'll never be 100%, but where could we be better? Where could we eliminate some of that waste, so that it gets easier for us? Then
One,
customers, pardon me.
finish your thought, and then I got to nerd out on a bookkeeping thing that we do.
Oh, that's awesome. And then I would say, if I would just close out with this one, then is this is one that we just don't do enough. We talked about keeping clients, going back to clients to offer them maintenance services, but like just like we do with our employees, and we have to show that we care. We talked about nurturing relationships, but with clients, nurturing relationship just means like, hey, asking them this simple question: how did we do on your project? You know, even if it was a bumpy project, if you're humble enough to go back to the client or have a system in place that someone calls back and says, hey, we know there's a few bumps in the road that occurred, but we want to make sure that we make this right. So we want to learn from this experience. What could we do next time to make your experience better than it was? Let's say that was a bad experience with a client. But essentially, if it was a good experience, you could also ask that any client, just say, hey,
Yeah, same
you know, make
question.
same question, right? How could we make this experience even better? And maybe you thought everything went well, and the client would be like, hey, next time, maybe instead of driving into that dirt puddle or mud puddle before coming into my driveway, that would be this would be awesome. Other than that, everything was perfect. Okay, cool. So I find that you can improve your business probably 5 times faster if you just ask that. I know it's scary.
I
So
was
if it's
saying they're
scary
not,
for you,
and most of the people aren't going to tell you.
yep,
Like if you
yep.
send them a questionnaire or just ask them to give you a Google review, they'll still give you a review or they'll still whatever, but they actually won't help you get better.
So one of the best companies I know, they do that. They actually pay someone part time to just make phone calls to clients and say like, "Hey, Mrs. Jones, we were at your property last week. How was everything? We want to hear the good, the bad, the ugly. We would like
Mhm.
to hear it. What can we do to improve it next time?" And then if it was really bad, there's kind of a script built in so that even the customers that are the most pissed off, it's like a way to diffuse the situation and say, okay, I'll have my manager call you, and we'll try to make this right. Right. So
Mhm.
she doesn't have to deal with it, but she can make all these phone calls, keep a smile. Right. And, but yeah, they have her on a part-time basis, just doing phone calls to check with customers. And you know what? Customer satisfactions, there's a rating is online. A
Mhm.
lot of these things went way up.
Oh, I
So
bet. I bet.
food for thought. Right.
Um, the second to last point you made about just like being able to isolate where your challenges are just takes me
Mm,
back to exactly what when we do bookkeeping for our bookkeeping clients, that value builder is exactly what we're trying to help them solve. Is you don't need to look at your entire profit and loss. You just you have to have it organized in a way based on how you make decisions. So we have 5 categories of decision making. All of the expenses roll into one of those 5 categories. And so when you get a P&L, yeah, and you mentioned it, like maybe you look at it monthly, maybe you at least just look at it once a year. However frequently you look at it, we send it, by the 10th of the month to all of our clients for the last month. Um, and it's color coded, red, yellow, or green. You don't need to know how to look at a profit and loss statement or know how to read it at all. But if you know the colors red, yellow, or green, and you're not colorblind. If you are colorblind, we could put a shape in there for you to like, if it was red, we'd just send you a middle finger. If it was green, we'd send you a thumbs up, and I don't know what we'd do if it was yellow. Um, but the whole point of like getting into those financials is purely to tell you I'm losing a couple points here. My infrastructure decisions didn't pay off. My administrative team isn't adding enough revenue. My cost of goods sold is high. We're spending too much on materials, or our labor's not efficient, or whatever the case is. And it's so glaring where the issues in our business are. Like, we have this, our Minneapolis window cleaning business did 1.1 million ish last year. I think we'll do 1.2, 1.3 this year. And the issues that we had last year we kind of like solved, but we created new issues this year. So like we moved the yellow and red spots on our P&L to different areas with different like strategies. But it's this interesting constant evolution of, we can at least isolate where we're off, right? Where the decisions that we're making are we're missing it. And then we focus on that. Like, we don't need to solve a capacity issue with an infrastructure change, or an administrative issue by like trying to work on our process out in the field. We get to focus on where the issue is, and then work on like solving that financial part of the business. So I just had to layer that in, because I think so many people get scared looking at their profit and loss, and that's your map, that's your decision-making roadmap. And if you have it organized well and super simple, and it's red, yellow, or green, it's like, you
I
know
like.
exactly where to spend your time working on your decision making. You don't need to guess, because what I tend to see is, because we're all operators, we all have like an operating background. We've all been out there doing the thing. When we're not making the kind of money we want to make, we go out, we look at what's happening in the field. We gravitate to, it's a production issue.
Mm-hmm.
But when we get over, when we're approaching that $1 million, it's rarely a production issue. We usually have that really dialed in. It's usually an infrastructure issue, an admin issue, a frugality issue, where we're like, or a marketing issue. We're making all these investments and they're just not generating the return that we need when we're trying to grow the business. So it's really interesting to see, and I see it with our 300 plus bookkeeping clients, where it's like funny seeing that those issues that they have are pretty common throughout different parts of scaling a business. Like, the issues that they have are very dependent on the size of the business that they have. We kind of all suffer the same types of issues at different points in our scaling process.
So much.
I digress.
But I love that, and I think it's useful in many different parts of the business, using colors. Hey, if we're in the green, we're good. If we're in the yellow, we should probably look at this and talk about it. If we're in the red, we got to change something. It's just not working for us. And I think it's simple for people to understand when they see that. And I love that system. I think it's one of the great ways. So, but
Frank, I want to hit on one more thing here before we wrap out. I know we're already over an hour. Like, we talked about this before we went live. I was like, 30 minutes. We'll be like, what are we going to talk about for the, like, to make this thing go an hour? And then we're going to hit an hour, and we're still going to be talking, and I'm going to have more questions for you. But since you're on Pacific time, it's early for you yet. I don't even have to worry about you. Now, we were talking earlier about the process of getting the owner out of the business. And I had even said, like, one of the things I see is the owner tries to get off the truck too fast. And I see it that can sometimes be detrimental to their speed of getting out of the day-to-day stuff, which seems counterintuitive, because you're like, well, if I get off the truck, then I'm out of that. Then I'm like not working in the business, I'm working on the business. But they do it a little bit too soon. They do it like they get off the truck when they're buying their second truck, or like before they even buy their second truck. And I think it's a little premature sometimes, because they go take a job that pays them less and they're not very good at, when they're abandoning, for their own financial reasons, they're abandoning a job that they're better at that pays them more. What advice you have, or what common tendencies do you see to that successfully help owners become an owner instead of an operator, and a CEO instead of a COO?
Yeah. So there's many different ways to do it, but one of the ways where I try to create this visual so people can understand is, there's really 5 stages to your business, right? The first one is your owner operator, so you're on the field most of the time. Second stage, you're starting to get off the field and you're working, you're beginning to work in the office. Third, you're just in the office and you're really just focused mainly on probably sales and marketing, right? And building
Mhm.
your systems. Then stage four is you're starting to really train your team to start making those decisions and or to bring the solutions to you. So basically what you're doing during stage 3 to stage 4 is creating the systems and having people give you solutions as you're not doing all the thinking. And then once you can really measure your performance, measure their performance, and to be able to know on a daily to weekly to monthly basis whether the business is making money. If you don't know on a weekly basis whether you've made money that week or you're over your hours or whatever that is, you're not ready to move out. Okay, you have
Mhm.
to stay until it's very consistent, and usually it has to be consistent not just for a few weeks or months. It's going to be consistent for a year plus, where people are doing the job for you. You're still monitoring everything. You're keeping track of the numbers. Yes, it makes sense. You've had no trust issues. People are stable. So and stability and trust is not built in a week. Stability and trust is built over months and years. So if you have a young team, you should be hyper aware that the process may take longer. So taking yourself out of the equation has to be calculated, and when it's done, when that stage 5, basically you're the owner, but you're not doing much more than just uh, checking, making sure everything's good, and solving the big problems or provide or helping out to coming out with the big solutions. But essentially, um, there's maturity involved in that, and I think you have to keep that in mind as you're growing too. So,
Yeah, it almost seems like a thing where the business will tell you.
yep,
You
yeah,
now,
yeah, that's a good way to put it.
which is like contrary to what we were talking about earlier, where it's like dictate, you need to let your life dictate the work, but
Mm-hmm.
you need to let the work dictate when you can exit the work and
Yeah,
and focus more on being an owner instead of an operator. Because
yeah,
I see people force that issue, and it pulls them back into the operations more because they do it a little too soon. They do it when financially it's a bad move because they're not generally
yep,
at that level. They're not obsessing about the financials that much, and so they do it because somebody told them it was the right thing to do, and they
yep.
didn't actually calculate what the impact of them getting out of the truck would be or getting out of the field would be. And they do it and they go, oh shit, now I'm not making any money because I'm paying them to go do that work. I'm sitting here doing something that doesn't add enough value because I don't really know what to do with myself and I can't generate enough work because I don't have enough employees and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they just like handcuff themselves and then they like hate their business. Is that back to the spectrum of like the love and hate of our businesses, which can like literally be, happen multiple times in a day. But usually there's that inflection point where they go back to hating their business and then they're like a victim of their business and they're back out in the field and they don't look in the mirror and say, "Oh, I just made this decision like far too soon to try to get out of the field or whatever it is and fire myself from the thing that I was doing." It's a process.
I use the analogy of like going on a road trip. Okay, the road trip is like the road trip of owning a business. It's like it's a trip, all right. Like you're gonna, depending on how you drive, it may bring you some surprises. But mature drivers usually are are not taking the same risk the same way, right?
Mhm.
So they're calculating their route better. They're saying, hey, they do a little bit more planning in advance, and usually they go through green lights a lot more. Like they're not trying to go through yellow lights and then they hit the red light, and then so that would be like, hey, they don't face as many sales issues or financial issues or HR issues or whatever else that the immature and I say just immature because sometimes your business is just not mature enough to
Mhm.
like let go and give all the power and delegate everything to someone who just doesn't have the experience to do it. So think about it this way: if you're going through too many yellow lights or red lights, it always comes back, and it's usually a tougher lesson to do it that way than
Yeah,
to
it
make
bites
sure
you.
that then you've been consistent and you've hit green lights after green lights because your people are taking care of these things and they're also in the green. They're not in the yellow all the time. and
Mhm.
you're not losing employees because they don't have the skill to take care of them, or you're not losing clients or revenue or profits. If things are consistent and always in the green for a good period of time where you're like, this is very predictable, it has to be predictable. And if it's not, it's probably not the right time.
Yep. Yep. If somebody is getting to the $1 million, there's two questions I want to hit here, and then we'll wrap things up. Nope, three questions. The third one's just a total oddball. Uh, if somebody is getting to like the $1 million level, what advice would you give them on getting that business set up to really like have them be the CEO and the owner? Is there a mindset? Is there an operating step that they should be thinking about taking to get, because that $1 million level is freaking sticky and it's
It
painful.
is. It's
How
the
do
pain.
they how do they get through that to really be an owner?
Yeah. So I did the exercise today and with a client of mine. And first things first is you want to take a look at, is there a way to simplify the business? Like, is there something that we're doing that's too complicated, that's not allowing us, or that's taking too much time, or that is making it difficult to evolve because we have that in place? For them, we just figured out that when I was talking about they have too much custom work. So it's not like all the time they're spending on that, they could be doing 2 or 3 other jobs that would actually be more profitable, more revenue. So they could go past that million, but their biggest, I guess, challenge is it's because they're in their own way of growth. So,
Mm-hmm.
is there any way to simplify your sales process? Is there any way to simplify your production process? Is there a way to track your numbers better, faster? Is there a software you could be using or a service you could be using um, that almost like it's like a subcontractor? It takes care of one of the problems that you just don't have time to deal with so that you can leverage your time to build better systems. So essentially, usually at $1 million, you have to you have to, if you want to kind of move out and grow more independent, or the business to be more independent from you, you just need better systems. So you need to step back a little bit, and sometimes that's where it's helpful to have a good mentor, a friend, coach, consultant, just to look at it and say like, hey, here's 3 things that stands out, that
Mm-hmm.
if you get that out of the way, that's going to give you more time, and it's going to actually empower your employees to be able to do it. It's going to be simpler for them to do it.
Yep.
So there's more chances for you to grow to the next level, right? That would
Yeah,
be
that
number one.
that does seem, when you put it like that, $1 million seems like that inflection point where it's like the classic, what got you here won't get you there. I feel like you can like brute force your way to $1 million, but
Yeah,
you can't brute force your way to 5 million or 10 million. Like
yeah,
5 million to 10 million takes a lot of strategy and a lot of people and a lot of processes. You can't just like work harder to get past a million. Like you can get
yeah.
to a million by working really hard, but
Hmm.
you can't get to 5 to 10 million without also working really smart.
Yeah, yeah. That comes back to working smart for sure.
So let me run that the flip way, the flip side of that question, which is like, similarly, what would you tell somebody that's doing 50,000 in revenue right now and they just started out and it's just them and maybe they're like getting a helper? What's the number one thing, like that super small business that's just trying to like get to a million? What should they be focusing on to expedite and I'll say like reduce the pain of the learning curve as much as possible?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's at that level. There can be many things happening at, let's say, 50,000. It could be you're just starting out, you don't have enough marketing out there. Sometimes it's like, hey, I could do more work if I had it, I just don't have it yet. Okay, cool. So if it's a marketing issue, then there's all kinds of different ways you can market that doesn't cost as much, and it's more about building relationships, calling other people in the industry or a similar industry to help you out. um, um, Talking to as many people as you can to make as many connections, I would say, is probably at that point what you need to build, because that's the reason why a company at a million is making a million. It's just it's got more relationships right
Mm-hmm.
now, and so you got to build credibility. But by talking to people, getting in front of people, showing your desire to grow, talking to them about what you're doing, for them to understand what you're doing, can make you grow a lot faster. But it's all about building connections and people who could use your services or that you could assist, so you could bring value to them.
Mm-hmm.
Not even clients, just it could be other businesses that need people like you because they're maybe short on employees. That's where I would start by checking is, and once you do that, that can be like that can give you that bounce that you need for that next step to bring you to 100 or 200. But then you usually need to start talking up to other people, to hire people. That's where building a relationship counts, because sometimes for business, but sometimes for your future employees that you want to be able to keep in touch with and say, hey,
Yep.
you're looking for an opportunity here. Here's one for you right now, right?
Yep. Yep.
So
All right, I got one last question for you. Had you not, I mean, there's always these like fate uh, dynamics to the path that we take, right? You
mm,
didn't you didn't plan on landscaping being a career when you first started doing landscaping stuff, and now here you are, and it's like you've made every part of it a career,
mm.
from like doing it to coaching it to talking about it. But if you weren't doing that, what would you be doing? If you're like, if the whole world of landscaping and home services just like disappeared tomorrow, what would Frank Bourque be like? You know what? I always wanted to try doing this. What would you go do?
Man, it's such a great question. But you know what?
No, it's not. It's a really stupid ass question, but
No.
but I'm curious anyway.
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I asked myself that question the other day because I was like, if for some reason, like this would not work for me anymore, or it's taking too much of my time and I'm not happy doing it, or I've reached a level where I just want to do other things. Honestly, I want to make sure that I'm doing at least one thing. And I would want to be able to use my skills to inspire people to at least find what they're passionate about so they can pursue it. So it's like a friend of mine, Eric Lodgefield, he sold a big business and he has all that, he had all that money and was like, man, what am I doing now? Which is not my case for me right now. You know what I mean? But it was really substantial. Like I'm talking like 150 million for one business. And so, but he started legit. His company is like it's Bliss Retreats. But basically what he does, he takes in the entrepreneurs and he shows them how to grow their business exponentially, but just based on their passion. He wants to make sure they're passionate and about it, and he wants to make sure it's part of they feel it's part of their purpose. And I really feel that would be part of what would call me to do something else. It's just very inspiring to me, that, and I think, you know what, I don't know if it'd be a good choice, but I would love to do more real estate stuff. Like it's just one of the things that I feel like I would love to put more energy into. Haven't in the last little while, but would love to get back into it. So that would probably be the two things I'd be doing then.
I dig it. I like your passion would be helping other people find their passions and like chase after their passions.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
like naturally that's something to be passionate about. It's hard not to get excited about helping other people get excited.
yeah. And it brings, I feel it brings me a lot when I know someone has clicked into something they're already good at doing or they already like. It's way easier to do life when you when you like what you're doing. So
Yeah.
that's the challenge for everyone, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The real estate thing, I don't know. I feel like your timing's poor right now, Frank.
Yeah,
I feel like
timing's
your
poor. I'm
timing's
not
poor right
doing
now.
it right now, but there might be
But hey,
opportunities coming up
I was gonna
soon, man.
say that's why it's a desire and not like a full fledged activity right now. You're just
Exactly.
being smart. You're biding your time. It's going to be a great opportunity. I don't know
Hey,
if
it
it's a
might
great
be.
opportunity right now, but it might be. I mean, like with all the COVID stuff, there's a lot to be shaken out in the real estate and commercial especially. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But Frank, I appreciate you jumping on, man. It's always good catching up with you and talking to you. Thanks for bringing so much value to the business nerds out here, learning all about the finances of running their business. It's good to see you again. It's been a
Yeah,
little bit since we've been like hanging out on a Zoom call and nerding out on business together. So thanks for jumping
great
on. I
pleasure,
appreciate it.
man. Really appreciate the invite. Thanks so much, Dan.
Always, always. Business nerds. I guess this is for those that are like keeping up with this week. This has been our third live show this week on Bookkeeping Beer and BS,
Wow.
and I got one more tomorrow night. Except it's gonna be like hunting stories turned into business lessons because that's I mean like it's a business show still. So even though we got hunting stories to tell, we're gonna divulge the business lessons that we learned. Who knows? It'd be same time, same place. We'll start 8 Central tomorrow night right here on Bookkeeping Beer and BS. Until then, my new sign off, Frank. Here, Frank, I'm working on this. I used to always say, "Go make some money," which seemed like a thing you'd say on a finance show. Except here's my realization: is like I'm not passionate about making money. I'm passionate about like gaining pride because pride is what fuels you to like the activities will make the money, but the pride is what like brings you the joy and keeps fueling you to go forward. So my sign off that I'm working on is what here's the thing, business nerds. Work smarter, not harder, but work harder too. Damn it, go earn some pride. That's it. Work
I love
harder
it.
too. Go get some pride, baby. That's it. All right, guys. We'll see you tomorrow night right back here on Bookkeeping Beer and BS. Until then, work smarter, not harder, but work harder too, damn it. Nighty night.